I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode 302. And today, we're here for another installment of our Rut Fresh Radio mini-series in which we're checking in with hunters from all across the country to get the latest and greatest intel on deer activity, current conditions, and the tactics that are working right now. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. And today we are back with our every Wednesday episode that probably you're used to by now, in which we're doing our Rut Fresh Radio mini-series. This is what we do during the hunting season every week. It's an episode where we chat with hunters from across the country, usually 4 or 5 every week, talking about what is happening right now in the whitetail wood. You know what, Spencer? You got to excuse me for having a sore throat right now, guys. And anyone listening, you can't get mad at me for coughing. You can't get frustrated with the fact that I can't get through our introduction because I have a very good excuse. But let me finish what I was saying. This is where we get intel on what's happening in the whitetail woods. So right now, that might be how weather conditions are impacting deer, or maybe how changing food sources are impacting deer, and the different types of tactics that might work. And then as we get into late October or November, we're going to be talking about the rut. And when we get into December, maybe we'll be talking about snowstorms. Whatever it is that's going on right now, that's what we're talking about. So, Spencer, that's what we usually talk about. Do you want to hear my excuse for why I can't talk today?
Yeah, and it better be a good one, because that was not pretty.
No, that wasn't my best work. I am sitting in a hotel room right now because I am recording the audiobook for my book, That Wild Country. So for the last 2 days, I've been reading my book out loud nonstop for I don't know how many hours. But the voice is hurting a little bit. I'm actually working on something else the rest of tonight, which I do want to talk about, Spencer. Unless you've got something really pressing that you need to start us out with, I want to kind of monopolize a little bit of our time here in the front to give everyone an update on something kind of cool. Am I allowed to do that on this Rut Fresh Radio episode?
Please do, because this is quite the announcement.
So not only am I recording an audiobook, which is great and dandy, but actually what's most interesting going on right now, and what I'm actually working on the rest of the night tonight, is our Back 40 video series. We talked about this a little bit last week, right? We have bought a farm. The Meat Eater team has bought a farm, and we are taking this project on to try to use this place as kind of a canvas to tell the story of small properties and private land conservation and what you can do when you're trying to manage a property, not just for a bunch of big deer, but everything in between, bees and birds and bucks, and trying to find great hunting too. So that's what this whole project's about. We launched our first episode of that series on Monday of this week. So the first one's out there. You can watch it on the Meat Eater YouTube channel. And I'm probably biased because I've been working on it, but I think it turned out pretty cool. Did you like it?
I really liked it, and I liked that it wasn't so whitetail heavy. Like, we're all obsessed about whitetails, but this took a deeper dive into like private land conservation and what one person can do with 64 acres.
Yeah, and you know, of course, we're gonna do some serious whitetail stuff, no doubt about it. We're gonna be hunting them hard. We're gonna be trying to find ways to tweak and manipulate and adjust and influence this property to have the best deer hunting possible. No doubt, we're gonna be digging into that. But yeah, to your point, yeah, there are other things too, and oftentimes what I'm finding as I'm diving into this whole project and trying to wrap my head around it and learn new things is that when you start looking at these other species and plant life and all the wildlife out there, you're working on this foundation that still does support those deer hunting goals. So what we do for birds and bees is going to help deer too, and vice versa. So it's been a great learning experience. I think if you guys check out that first episode, you'll get a better idea of what we're trying to do, and now we just have to try to do the work and make it all a reality. So that's my update for the day. Have you done anything whitetail yet, or are you still chasing elk?
Nothing whitetail yet. My first whitetail hunt is still actually probably like 3 weeks away. So for now, I'm just relying on our Rut Fresh Radio guests and you, Mark, to fill me in on whitetails and keep me going until I get on that first hunt. Are you going to be hunting the back 40 like next weekend? Isn't that Michigan's opener?
It's not next weekend. It's it's like the Tuesday after that, I think. It's October 1st, if I've got my calendar right in my head. But yeah, October 1st, I will be hunting the back 40. So that'll be my first Michigan update from the field. But I actually have a Michigan scouting update, if you'll take it. Well, I got a hot report, a hot tip from someone I know very well who said that the rut is on in full force in Michigan right now. I'm telling you, man, the rut is pumping. And the person who told me this is my wife. I kid you not, my wife, and she actually does know all about deer. She told me that she was watching behind our house. We had a field, and there's like some deer stuff going on behind the house. And she said she saw multiple bucks chasing a doe and fighting. Like, I kept telling him, like, you're kidding me. Like, there's no way that's happening. What are you talking about? And she kept saying, no, I'm not joking. This is happening right now. I'm watching it. I talked to her on the phone while she was watching, not just like 2 bucks, like tickling their tines, different bucks, 3 or 4 different bucks going back and forth, going out and getting after it. I have no idea what that's about. It's obviously not the rut. I know that. But there was just some funky behavior going on the other night. Running around, she said 6 or 7 different bucks running all over the place, including like 2 nice-looking deer. So bizarre. I have no explanation for it, but a very interesting observation from one of my top scouting experts out there. So had to pass that along.
We hear it all the time when it gets to October or even December during the secondary rut that all it takes is one hot doe. And a lot of our listeners by now are probably familiar with like the fetus studies that have been done that kind of show that the rut, for the most part, as far as breeding goes, takes place in like the same 5-day window. Quite often that's the case, but there are does that get bred, like I think all the way as early as August and as late as like February and March. So if there was some random doe out there that came into estrus, then who knows? There's no rules at that point for late September if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna guess that it's something else, just some crazy behavior, but you never know. Like you said, if it was a month later, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, it's one of these super early does. This is just like so outside of the realm of the usual, but I know I trust her that she at least saw that kind of stuff going on. I know that she knows how to identify that kind of thing. So I am intrigued, and I wish I was there to see it myself.
Yeah, well, besides that report, we have a report from Cody Butler from Kansas from Dream Chasers Hunt, and then in New Hampshire we talked to Brett Joy from Real Tree Sea Bucks, and then Greg Mead from Whitetail Properties in Kentucky, and then we go to Minnesota and talk to Matt Coleman from Captured Creative.
Nice. That's a good slate. Is there any kind of unifying truth that you've gotten from these folks yet? Is there any theme of this week's episode?
Not really. People are talking about the unseasonably warm temperatures, and then they're also starting to know some sign activity taking place, and also kind of the food source shift, that acorns are starting to hit the ground, beans are starting to yellow. So there's kind of that light bulb moment that we've talked about before, that you sort of see sometime between like mid-September and early October, where the deer that you'd been seeing all year kind of disappear.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm interested to hear what's going on. I will stop my random rambling and let's just get after it.
All right. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, man.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild. But searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
All right, and joining us on the line now is Cody Butler in Kansas from Dream Chasers Hunt. Now, Cody, in Kansas, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would probably say about a 5 right now. And the reason why I say that is we do have some trail camera pictures and stuff like that of bucks moving around in daylight, even mature deer. We are seeing some younger deer on their feet. But for the most part, your 4-plus-year-old mature bucks are kind of hitting that, coming out into your fields and stuff like that, right after dark and stuff like that. So I'd say about a 5 right now.
Are you starting to see the soybeans turn to yellow in Kansas?
Yes, definitely. Soybeans are definitely changing. I'm in northern Kansas, so I can't really say, for central and southern, but I assume since they're further south, a little warmer, they are probably as well changing. There's actually some guys around here. I live right on the Nebraska line. Just across the border here in Nebraska, there's actually some guys starting to harvest their beans and stuff. So things are definitely full swing for change right now. That's for sure.
Are you losing deer on those yellow soybeans then this time of year?
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge factor. Just kind of depends on the year. We do have some actually that are pretty green. I kind of talked before, we had a lot of rain this way this year, more than I've seen in my lifetime. My house actually sits close to the Republican River here, and we almost had floodwaters from the river in our house. So some guys, had to plant their soybeans late. I don't have any of those, unfortunately, but there is some guys that are hunting, good green soybeans still, because farmers had to plant late due to flooding and stuff like that, especially up here close to the river. Unfortunately, most of my Kansas ground is deeper into Kansas, not right up here on the river. So I don't have a whole lot of green beans, and that's really transitioned them to the corn, which is not the greatest thing in the world, because when they go into corn, we can't really go after them too good this time of year. But corn harvest is kind of started a little bit here and there on some dry land crops. So hopefully before long the corn will start coming out and they won't have as many places to hide.
Besides with the crops, are you feeling the effects of this summer's floods in other ways? For example, did you lose any buck bedding from the rising water?
I think so, honestly. We did. I do have one place that's close to our home farm in Nebraska that I lease that's in Kansas. The two farms kind of butt together right on the state line. It's a pretty unique situation. And my cousin was actually here hunting with me this week. He drew a muzzleloader tag, which is what Kansas's season is right now. You can bow hunt and muzzleloader hunt. And he drew a muzzleloader tag, and we actually went and hunted that lease on the river. And they actually did get the corn out here like 4 or 5 days ago. And it's directly on the river. And it's one of my best places. If you've followed any of our stuff, I killed a deer we called Longhorn on that lease, actually, and a couple other really good deer there over the years. And it's kind of one of my go-to spots. And I've got a really good, probably mid-60s 10-pointer and a big 8-pointer that's probably in the mid-50s there that we really thought we would see after the corn was out. And so we went there last night, and we saw 4 does in total. For quite some time, they had to leave and find a different place to go. And I think it's definitely kind of changed the way they've acted around the river here, for sure.
This time of year, when you have a lot of deer bedding in the corn, do you have a strategy for getting an arrow in those deer, or are they just unhuntable at this point?
It just kind of depends on the situation. A lot of times I'll set my trail cameras up this time of year, kind of to and from, like watering. Most of my farms in Kansas, my grandfather, who has now passed away but owned all these properties, he actually put water holes or ponds on almost every single one of the farms for wildlife, and which is good because in our area, other than our lake here, we have a lot of dry creeks, and I mean there's pasture ponds and stuff like that, but there's not a ton of water around. So I really try to set up a lot of my stuff this time of year when it's hot, trails going to and from corn to water, things like that. And it definitely changes, or I guess what I'm trying to say is you definitely notice that you can't hunt those deer sometimes if you don't have water. If you do have water this time of year, because it is so hot, I will a lot of times get those deer in daylight coming out of corn to drink if we have corn close to water. So that's a really big thing. But there is places as well that I just simply can't get in. The place we hunted tonight actually is a 160-acre field and then of corn, basically. And in the very back corner, there's about a 5-acre patch of timber with a pond there. And we hunted there this evening, just knowing that water was close. I actually have a food plot down in there as well. And we set up basic transition of deer coming out of timber and corn. And we saw like 13 different deer, I think. Didn't see the buck we were after, but we did see a few other smaller bucks. And about 50% of the deer came out of the corn and went down and got a drink and milled around the food plot and then went back to the corn. And the other 50% of them came out of the timber and then headed to the corn. So it definitely hurts us this time of year, especially when the beans are starting to change. They really transition to that corn. And once they're in there, it's definitely hard to get a pattern on them and get them figured out because they really don't have to leave too much.
Have you noticed any sign making start to show up in Kansas?
Definitely. There's actually a lot of scrapes and rubs. We noticed the place that we went tonight. We were after a big 6-pointer. He had been coming out of corn, going down into a food plot, and we have a pond there. And we actually noticed tonight when we walked in, just 3 days ago, I actually checked the trail camera and there wasn't any scrapes or rubs. And when we went in tonight, there was actually a brand new big scrape on the edge of the food plot and a pretty good rub on a cedar tree just in the last 3 days. So I really think as some of these cooler temps come in, I think we had a high of 80 today. By the end of the week, we've got some lows in the 50s. So I think as these temps start to drop, these deer are really going to start making, laying down scrapes and starting to figure out their territories and stuff like that. So it's definitely they're starting to get with it for sure.
Going forward then this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Kansas?
I honestly think it's going to jump quite a bit. I really think we might be up towards an 8, honestly. We got some cool weather coming in. We got some highs in the upper 60s and low 70s. Like I said, lows in the 50s. I think that's going to be a huge change compared to what we had. We've been having some mid-90s and things like that. So I definitely think buck activity is going to go up when those temperatures drop. And like I said, harvest is starting. We've got some guys getting their dry land corn out, stuff like that. So the more and more corn gets out in the country here, we're going to have more deer moving into those places, the smaller woodlots and things like that we hunt here in Kansas, where they're easier to get at and we can pattern them a little bit easier.
All right, Cody, great intel. Thanks for joining me and good luck this season.
Thanks, man. You too. Take care.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Brett Joy in New Hampshire from Real Tree Sea Bucks. Now, Brett, in New Hampshire, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
Well, I would hate to be negative, but I really feel it's about a 1. I've never seen it as bad as it is. We have a couple different factors contributing to that. The first of which, and probably the most significant, is the acorn crop. We have an incredible red oak crop in my area, and I think in a lot of New Hampshire. So the bucks really don't have to move very far at all. They don't have to move. Literally, they could probably just get their caloric intake sitting on their belly all day. They don't even have to get up. That also, the fact that it's been above average temperatures. For the most part, there's been a couple days that are about average, but I think there's been 7 to 10 in the last, 7 to 10 days out of the last 13, I think the season's been open for, have been above average. And the last is the fact that I just think there's probably a few less bucks in the woods in New Hampshire than there were last year, because we had an incredible deer harvest, which is a good thing for hunters. But we also had no mass crop and an early heavy snowfall and cold temperatures during the rut. So I don't think that a lot of the bucks went into the winter probably in a little bit rougher shape than they typically do. And I suspect there's a bit more of a winter kill. So just less opportunity for bucks in general in the woods this year.
Can you recall a season in recent years where the acorn crop was this big, this early?
Yeah, we this actually is more typical than you'd think. We do have this probably every maybe 3 years. I think 2 years ago in 2017 it was like that. Thinking back, I know that I've had a few back within the past 5 or 10 years that are like that. So it's typical, and it's something that we deal with every few years, and you kind of have to expect that it's going to happen. I knew it was going to. You scout and look for mass-producing trees, and they're loaded up, so you know it's coming. But it's still difficult, even though you know it's coming.
How long do the deer key in on those acorns? Is that something that you're concerned with all fall, or does that just go through October?
Yeah, no, it's pretty much all fall for us. We have such a high volume of mass crop here this year that they will be keyed on those acorns probably through November into December. And even some years we have acorns left in the spring that just aren't even eaten. So that'll be the theme of the entire fall. Obviously, as things change with the rut, that'll change the game a little bit. But right now it's all about acorns and warm weather. Those are the two biggest things that we're dealing with.
So what do your setups look like this season versus last, with those acorn crops being so different?
So I think that the way to combat this is to look at it kind of backwards. Now, there's food everywhere for the most part. So I try to focus on bedding units instead of food. That's kind of the thing that's at, I guess, a premium, although it really isn't, because there's food everywhere. But if you had to find a limiting factor, it'd probably be bedding. But even in the big woods, that's extremely difficult as it is, but it's less difficult than trying to determine which food source you're using, because there's food every which way you turn. So really I'm focusing on bedding and trying to run cameras around bedding areas and figure out where the deer are bedding. And then I think once you determine that, you have a chance of getting on them if you can just figure out, what stand of oaks that they're keying in on at that time. But the problem is it's always changing this time of year. Because they'll bounce from stand of oak to stand of oak. If some oaks are preferred over others, acorns or a particular tree tastes better.
Do you notice any big changes in sign making in years where there's such a big acorn crop and those bucks maybe don't have to travel as far as they normally do?
So I don't think I've seen I see much of a difference in the volume of sign making. What we do see is it's more in concentrated areas. So they'll find a bunch of rubs and scrapes around pockets of oaks that they're preferring at that time. If you find those rubs and scrapes, they could be on to the next, preferred oak of the week, and all that sign is, irrelevant. So you really have to find the sign right when they're making it, when they're there, and capitalize. And if not, it's just you're trying to hit it right, and it's really difficult to do.
Going forward then this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in New Hampshire? I
think it's probably going to maintain at a solid 1. I don't see it getting any better. The extended forecast is still above average temperature. If anything, there's going to be more acorns on the ground on the next week. And, we're getting to this period of time where bucks are becoming reclusive and loners, so they're becoming even more difficult to find. At least the first week of the season, we had a little bit of summer activity and where these bucks were a little bit more social. But we're not going to have that anymore. So it may even get worse, unfortunately. I hate to be negative, but that's just kind of my estimation of the next week.
I'm sure your forecast is close, but I hope you're wrong, Brett. But good luck for the rest of the season.
Me too. I hope a lot. Thanks, Spencer.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Greg Mead in Kentucky from Whitetail Properties. Now, Greg, in Kentucky, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
Probably been about a 6 as of late, as far as daylight movement. The temperatures here have been maybe a little bit unseasonably warm in the upper 80s, maybe 90s in the days, and just isn't cooling off that much at night right now. So that's really restricting the movement to probably the last 30 minutes or so of daylight in the evening, and maybe the same in the mornings.
What kind of food sources should hunters in Kentucky be focusing in on right now? Where they have them available, the oaks and the acorns are really starting to bear right now and drop, and particularly the white oaks. If you've got them, if you've got crop fields nearby, be it soybeans or whatnot, and they're really starting to move toward the acorns, which is pretty normal this time of year. With it being unseasonably warm, do you then focus on water at all in Kentucky?
Yes, that does help, especially if the area you're hunting has a limited source of water, be it ponds or small watering holes. If you've got long streams that are still rolling, year-round streams, then that can be a little bit difficult to key in on.
Have you noticed any sign making that started yet?
A little bit. I think mostly what we're seeing though is the velvet shedding, where they're starting to rub, but they're mostly that. There was a little bit of a peak there of that right around the end of August and the first week of September when they were coming out of velvet. Haven't really noticed any abnormally high amount though since then. I believe the cooler temperatures though really kick those animals in gear, and they'll start to show a little more sign.
Where are you running your trail cameras right now, and how is that going to change as we get into October?
Right now, still trying to run them off of food sources, maybe on trails leading to those food sources, or even possibly in the staging areas right before they hit those food sources. As we keep moving on through into the month of October, I think you might be able to get them on some early scrapes, not necessarily breeding scrapes, but the year-round scrapes that they make, or licking branches that they visit, and you can start to catch animals there, or even in funnels and places where the movement is restricted.
Do you pay any attention to moon phases this time of year?
This time of year, it seems like, to me, not really. The temperature seems to be the major dictating factor on when these animals move right now. Get closer into the rut, it seems like, yes, the moon phases will, start to determine a little bit of that movement, and you get more midday movement. But right now, it's just the temperatures just starting to put on their winter coats rather, and it'd be like you or I wearing a winter coat trying to run around in 90-degree weather. They're not real active right now, more than they have to be.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Kentucky?
As I looked at the forecast, it looks like we're heating back up next week as well. We've got a day or two right now that's dropped down in the 80s, but as we move forward into next week, the forecast is we're going to be back into the 90s. So I really don't expect it to change very much through next week just yet. But the first really good cold snap we get, or cool front we get that moves in, I could definitely expect to see them on their feet. maybe another 30 minutes or so before daylight, maybe an hour total or something. So I think animals could certainly be, exploited to reach in there and get some kills maybe.
Well, good luck this season, and thanks for joining me.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, and joining us on the line next is Matt Coleman in Minnesota from Captured Creative. Now, Matt, in Minnesota, what would you say the buck activity has been lately on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say it's about a 7. Not much for mature bucks. It doesn't seem like in our area, but lots of younger bucks moving. Seeing almost all the younger bucks on the camera every time we go hunt.
What do you think is the food source to key in on this time of year?
For us right now, they kind of seem to be going off the beans because they're starting to turn yellow and mature a little bit. So we really try and key in on like the brassicas, oats, if we have any of those planted, things like that, some of the greens.
Have you noticed any sign making starting to show up in Minnesota?
The last time we hunted, actually, we saw almost every buck we saw was either working a scrape or making a rub, and they're all kind of starting to spar with each other a little bit and starting to show a little bit more aggression towards each other. So,
what do your guys' opening day setups look like? I know Minnesota just had their opening here about a week ago or so.
For us, we don't have very many huntable trees on our land, so we sit in a lot of like box blinds that we built ourselves, build them big enough to shoot a bow out of them and comfortable for a gun too. Normally we try and play the wind as much as we can, not really mess anything up, more just kind of observe the first few days at least and see what the movement is like on cameras.
How does your trail cam strategy change as we get into October?
We kind of start to move our cameras onto scrapes, licking branches, things like that, and just kind of more travel corridors. If new bucks show up in the area, then we try and catch them, maybe start to pattern what they do on a weekly basis.
Matt, for opener, were you still seeing some bachelor groups together?
Yeah, we saw a lot of the smaller bucks, maybe some like the 2.5 or 3.5-year-olds in groups of about 3 or 4 still. The bigger bucks kind of seem to be peeling off away from each other, though.
Going forward then in this next week or so, what do you think that buck activity is going to be on a scale of 1 to 10 in Minnesota?
I would say the activity would probably be about a 7 or an 8, kind of depending on what the weather is like. I'd expect a lot of the younger bucks to still be moving. Some of the older ones, it's hard to say, I guess. It's kind of hit and miss in our area. I don't know. We're kind of in an open area. Some of the timbered areas, maybe where they hang out a little more during the day and mill around, could be a little bit better.
All right, Matt. Well, good luck to you and the guys from Captured. Thanks for joining me.
Yep, no problem.
And that concludes this week's episode of Rut Fresh Radio. Thanks to Cody, Brett, Greg, and Matt for joining me, and thank you guys for listening. As always, make sure you're following me, Mark, and Meat Eater on social media, and don't forget to check out episode 1 of The Back 40, available now on Meat Eater's YouTube channel. Later this week, you're also going to be seeing episode 3 of How to Kill a Buck on YouTube, where me, Mark, and Tony Peterson discuss early October strategies and break down how we'd hunt a certain property. I'll talk to you guys next week, but until then, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
As you know, the Meat Eater live tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. What you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in Meat Eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night and we'll see you on stage.